Our story begins not in the ruins of an ancient civilization, but in its echo, a city that should not exist, populated by people who do not know they are dreams, living lives that feel as real as breath itself. This is Zanarkand, but not the Zanarkand of legend. This is something else entirely, something suspended between memory and imagination, between what was and what can never truly be again. And in this impossible place, beneath stadium lights that have burned for 1,000 years without anyone questioning why, a young man is about to discover that his entire existence is built on foundations more fragile than he could ever imagine. Tidus is 17 years old, and in his world, he is somebody. The star player of the Zanarkand Abe's blitzball team, son of the legendary Jekt, who disappeared a decade ago into mystery and whispered stories. Tidus moves through life with the confidence of someone who believes he knows exactly where he belongs. The city stretches endlessly around him, a metropolis of lights and steel and water, buildings that rise toward a sky he has never questioned, streets filled with people he has never thought to doubt. It is his entire universe, this city, and he navigates it with the ease of someone who has never considered that universes might have edges, that reality might have seams where one truth ends and another begins. The stadium is alive tonight, packed with thousands who have come to watch the tournament match. Tidus signs autographs as he makes his way through the crowd, smiling for admirers who shout his name, playing the role of celebrity with practiced ease. There is an energy in the air, electric and expectant, the kind of atmosphere that comes when people gather to witness something they believe matters. The lights, the noise, the press of bodies all around him. This is what Tidus knows. This is his reality, solid and undeniable. Or so he believes as he prepares to take the field and demonstrate once again why he bears comparison to his father, why people speak his name with the same reverence they once reserved for Jekt. But something is wrong. Even before it happens, there is a wrongness in the air, a quality of tension that goes beyond pre-game excitement. Tidus feels it without understanding it, a prickling at the back of his neck, an instinct warning him of danger his conscious mind cannot yet identify. And then the sky darkens. Not gradually, not with the slow approach of storm clouds, but suddenly, absolutely, as if someone has drawn a curtain across the sun. The crowd's roar falters, confusion rippling through thousands of voices, and Tidus looks up to see something that should not exist, something his mind struggles to categorize because it fits no framework his experience has provided. Sin. Even in Dream Zanarkand, even in this place kept separate from the wider world by Yu Yevon's ancient magic, there are stories about sin. Half-remembered nightmares, fragmentary tales that filter in from somewhere beyond knowing, whispers of a monster that destroys cities and devours civilizations. But they are just stories, legends meant to frighten children, not real things that could actually manifest in the solid, dependable world Tidus inhabits. Dream Zanarkand should be invisible to sin, protected by the same magic that sustains it. But something has changed. Something inside the monster has drawn it here with purpose and intention. Except now it is here, massive beyond comprehension, its presence warping reality around it like heat distorts air. The thing is impossibility made flesh, if flesh is even the word for what composes it. It looms above the stadium, above the city, above everything Tidus has ever known, and its very existence rewrites the rules he thought governed his life. What Tidus does not know, cannot know yet, is that this is not random destruction. This is recognition. Inside sin, some fragment of consciousness that was once human has reached across impossible distances to find him, to pull him from dream into reality, to begin a journey that will end with Sun, confronting what his father became. Panic erupts instantly. The ordered crowd becomes a stampeding mass of terror, people crushing against each other in desperate attempts to flee something they cannot escape, something so vast that fleeing becomes a meaningless gesture. Buildings begin to crumble as Sin's gravitational pull tears at their foundations. Water from the Blitzball sphere, that carefully contained environment where Tidus performs his art, rises impossibly upward, defying physics as the monster's power reshapes the fundamental forces holding reality together. The stadium groans and fractures, metal screaming as structural supports fail, and in the midst of apocalypse, Tidus stands frozen, his athlete's reflexes suddenly useless against a threat he cannot comprehend. Then Auron appears. He moves through the chaos with impossible calm, a figure in red who seems untouched by the pandemonium surrounding him. Tidus knows Auron, or thinks he does. The man appeared in Zanarkand years ago, after Jecht vanished, and has watched over Tidus since with an attention that felt protective without ever being explained. Auron has always been a mystery, speaking in fragments and half-truths. But now is not the time for mysteries. Now is the time for survival. And Auron tosses Tidus a sword, his voice cutting through the screaming crowd with calm authority. "This is it," he says, as if everything that came before was merely prelude, as if Tidus's entire life has been building toward this single incomprehensible moment. They fight, not sin itself, that would be absurd, like ants declaring war on mountains. They fight the things sin spawns, creatures that emerge from its body like thoughts given terrible form. Sin spawn, Auron calls them, and Tidus discovers that the sword feels right in his hands, that combat comes naturally in ways his blitzball training never suggested it should. They cut through monsters while the city crumbles around them, and somehow, impossibly, they make their way closer to sin itself, drawn toward it by Auron's direction, and a logic Tidus does not understand, but follows anyway, because the alternative is standing still, while everything he knows collapses into chaos. And then they touch it. Auron reaches out toward Sin's incomprehensible bulk, and Tidus, not knowing what else to do, reaches out as well. The contact is like drowning in light. Reality fractures completely, the already impossible situation fragmenting into something beyond impossibility, and Tidus feels himself pulled apart and reassembled, scattered and gathered, destroyed and recreated in a process that has no name because language was never meant to describe what happens when dreams touch something real enough to unmake them. He screams into light that has no source, falls through space that has no direction, and when consciousness finally returns, everything has changed in ways he cannot yet begin to understand. The ruins around him are silent, not the silence of anticipation or rest, but the silence of endings, of things finished beyond recovery. Tidus wakes in water, ancient stone walls rising around him, structures so old they seem to predate the concept of time itself. This is not Zanarkand, or rather, it is Zanarkand, but Zanarkand transformed beyond all recognition, Zanarkand as ruin rather than metropolis, Zanarkand dead and empty and impossibly, terribly wrong. He stumbles through corridors where no one has walked in centuries, past walls covered in symbols he does not recognize, through chambers that echo with abandonment. Where is everyone? The thought circles his mind like a trapped bird. Where is the city? Where is home? What has happened while he was unconscious that could transform everything so completely? He is not alone in the ruins. Creatures lurk in the shadows, fiends drawn to the ancient structures by instincts older than understanding. They attack, and Tidus defends himself with the sword Auron gave him, fighting on autopilot, while his mind struggles to process what his eyes are showing him. This cannot be real. This must be dream or delusion, some nightmare triggered by trauma, because the alternative is that everything he knew is gone, and that alternative is too vast to contain, too terrible to accept. He fights his way toward open air, toward sky and sunlight that might make sense of the senseless, and stumbles finally into day that illuminates his incomprehension without resolving it. The ocean stretches before him, endless and empty. No buildings break the horizon. No signs of civilization mar the pristine desolation. Just water extending forever and ruins slowly being reclaimed by time. Tidus collapses on the shore, exhaustion and confusion overwhelming him, and that is where she finds him. Riku, 15 years old and bright in ways that seem impossible given the wasteland surrounding them, approaches with the wary confidence of someone used to finding strange things in stranger places. She speaks to him in a language he does not understand, words that sound wrong in his ears, and when he responds in his own tongue, she reacts with shock that mirrors his own confusion. She speaks his language, she says finally, switching linguistic gears with the ease of someone multilingual. But how? Where did he learn it? The old language, the dead language, the tongue of Zanarkand that no one speaks anymore because Zanarkand itself is gone, destroyed 1,000 years ago by sin's wrath, reduced to the ruins he just crawled out of. 1,000 years, the words hang in the air between them. Meaningless sounds that should convey temporal distance, but instead convey only impossibility. Tidus stares at her, trying to understand, trying to make the pieces fit together in some configuration that makes sense. 1,000 years, Zanarkand destroyed. But he was just there, just yesterday, or maybe just hours ago, depending on how time is measured in situations where time itself seems to have fractured, along with everything else. Riku belongs to something called the Al-Bed, a people who speak their own language and use something called Machina, which Tidus will later learn is technology viewed with suspicion and fear by most of Spira's inhabitants. She rescues him not out of altruism, but pragmatism. The salvage operation her people were conducting in the ruins has yielded an unexpected prize in the form of a confused young man who might know something valuable, or at least might be worth something to someone. She brings him aboard their ship, feeds him, attempts to get information from him that he cannot provide because he himself does not understand what has happened. The Al-Bed study him with curiosity, mixed with concern. He speaks the old language. He claims to be from Zanarkand. Either he is mad or something impossible has occurred, and in a world where sin exists, impossibility has flexible boundaries. The ship is heading toward open waters when sin attacks. Not the ship specifically, but the ocean around it, the monster's presence creating waves and gravitational distortions that threaten to capsize them. In the chaos, Tidus is thrown overboard, swept into the churning sea. He surfaces, gasping, treading water as the Al-Bed ship pulls away, unable to risk coming back for him while sin's presence makes the waters deadly. He is alone in the ocean, exhausted and confused, watching the ship disappear toward the horizon while he drifts in waters that could kill him through drowning or whatever creatures inhabit them. The currents carry him, and consciousness fades in and out, until eventually he washes ashore on a beach he does not recognize, rescued by tide and fortune from a death that seemed inevitable moments before. Besaid Island is small. After Zanarkand's sprawl, after the endless metropolis that was his entire world, this village feels impossibly tiny, impossibly simple. Wooden structures, dirt paths, people who move with the ease of those connected to land and sea rather than steel and electricity. It is beautiful in a way Zanarkand never was, beautiful in its smallness, but it is also alien, a reminder that he is not home and may never be home again. The villagers regard him with curiosity when Waka finds him on the beach, this stranger washed up by tide or fate or whatever forces move people across impossible distances. The salt spray clings to his skin. The sound of waves is constant, rhythmic, nothing like the mechanical hum of dream Zanarkand. Waka is immediately likable despite, or perhaps because of, his relentless optimism. Captain of the Besaid Auron blitzball team, he seizes on Tidus's claims of being a player with enthusiasm that borders on desperation. The Aurochs, Waka explains, are historically the worst team in the league. They lose constantly, spectacularly, in ways that should discourage continued participation, but somehow never quite do. A skilled player from Zanarkand, even a Zanarkand that supposedly does not exist, represents hope that maybe this year will be different. Waka is not concerned with how Tidus arrived, or what his presence might mean. He is concerned with blitzball and victory and the tournament in Lucca, that represents his team's annual ritual humiliation. But there is sadness beneath Waka's cheerfulness. Grief he carries without quite acknowledging it. His brother Chapu died a year ago, killed while fighting as part of something called the Crusaders, a military organization dedicated to combating sin. Waka sees echoes of his brother in Tidus, similarities that probably do not exist, but which Waka needs to see, because grief demands we find our lost loved ones reflected in whatever surfaces remain available. When Waka gives Tidus Chapu's sword, the gesture carries weight beyond the practical. It is transference and blessing and hope all wrapped together, an attempt to keep his brother alive through this stranger who fell out of nowhere into Waka's carefully constructed world. The village is preparing for something, Tidus learns. A pilgrimage. The word is spoken with reverence and fear in equal measure, as if it represents both hope and loss too, intertwined to separate. In the temple, a young woman has been undergoing trials for an entire day, and the villagers wait with an anxiety that suggests enormous stakes riding on her success or failure. When she finally emerges, when Yuna walks out of the temple's inner chambers accompanied by her guardians, Tidus sees someone who will change everything, though he does not know it yet, cannot know it, because knowing the future would require accepting that his past is not what he believed it was. Yuna is 17, the same age as Tidus, but she carries herself with a gravity that makes her seem older, wiser, weighted with purpose he does not yet understand. She is beautiful, but it is not her appearance that captures attention. It is her presence, something in the way she moves, the way others defer to her, the way she looks at the world as if seeing both its beauty and its sorrow in equal measure. She has just become a summoner, Waka explains, passed the trials and gained the allegiance of her first Aeon. Now she will journey across Spira, visiting temples and gathering power, preparing for the moment when she will face sin and bring the calm. The calm. Another word spoken with reverence, capital letter audible in pronunciation. The calm is what happens after a summoner defeats sin. A period of peace that lasts for years, maybe a decade if they are lucky, before sin inevitably returns and the cycle begins again. Yuna's father, High Summoner Braska, brought the last calm 10 years ago, sacrificing himself in the process in ways Tidus does not fully grasp, but understands enough to recognize as tragedy. Now Yuna follows in his footsteps, choosing the same path, accepting the same fate, and everyone treats this as noble rather than insane, as duty rather than suicide. That night, Tidus speaks with Yuna outside the village, and she asks about Zanarkand with an interest that goes beyond curiosity. She knows the name, knows it as legend and myth, knows it as the destination of her pilgrimage because the ruins of ancient Zanarkand are where summoners go to obtain the final Aeon, the ultimate power needed to defeat sin. But a living Zanarkand, a city that thrives and continues, that is impossible, or should be. Yet this young man speaks of it with such certainty, such detailed knowledge, that either he is mad or something exists beyond the boundaries of what Spira believes possible. Yuna does not dismiss him. She listens with an openness that suggests she already knows the world contains more mysteries than her teachers acknowledged. And then she mentions Yecht. Casually, in the course of conversation, she mentions knowing a man named Yecht, who came from Zanarkand 10 years ago, who travelled with her father on his pilgrimage, who helped Braska defeat sin and bring the calm. Tidus' father, his father, who disappeared when Tidus was 7, who vanished into the ocean during a training exercise and was never seen again, who Tidus has spent a decade resenting and missing in equal measure. Yecht was here, in this impossible future, helping Yuna's father do impossible things, and the revelation should answer questions, but instead multiplies them exponentially. How did Yecht get to Spira? What happened to him after Braska's victory? Why did he never come home, never send word, never give any indication he was alive somewhere beyond Tidus's reach? The questions spiral without resolution, and Tidus finds himself volunteering to join Yuna's pilgrimage as one of her guardians. Partly, he does it to find answers about his father, to trace Yecht's path and discover what happened 10 years ago. Partly, he does it because Waka asks him to, because Waka sees his brother in Tidus and wants him close. But mostly, he does it because Yuna asks, not with words, but with eyes that suggest she needs him even if she cannot articulate why. And Tidus finds he cannot refuse someone who looks at him like that, who sees him not as celebrity or disappointment, but simply as someone who might help carry a burden too heavy for one person alone. Her existing guardians are protective to the point of hostility. Lulu, the black mage, whose elegant appearance masks a core of steel, watches Tidus with skepticism that borders on disdain. He is an outsider, unproven, potentially dangerous, and she makes clear that if he endangers Yuna, if he fails in his duty through incompetence or malice, there will be consequences she does not need to articulate because her gaze makes them perfectly clear. Kimahri Ronso, the blue-furred warrior who raised Yuna after her father's death, says nothing but watches everything, his silence more intimidating than threats because it suggests judgment. Proceeding on levels Tidus cannot access or influence, they depart Besaid on a ship bound for Kilika, the next stop on the pilgrimage. The journey should be peaceful, a chance for Tidus to acclimate to his new role and reality, but peace is not something Spira offers readily. Sin appears on the horizon, and the ship changes course to avoid it, but avoidance proves insufficient when the monster decides to make a demonstration. It does not attack Kilika directly. Sin does not need to attack. Its mere presence is weapon enough. The gravitational distortions it creates tearing buildings apart. The waves it generates smashing the coastal village into kindling and drowning. Tidus watches from the ship as an entire community is obliterated in moments, as people die by hundreds for no reason, except they happen to be in Sin's path. When they reach the shore, when they wade through debris and death toward what remains of the village, Tidus sees his first sending. Yuna stands at the water's edge, staff in hand, and begins to dance, The movement is prayer made physical, ritual that bridges living and dead. And as she dances, spirits appear in the water around her. Fireflies, Waka calls them, the remnants of the deceased, and Yuna guides them towards something called the far plane, the afterlife where they belong. Without the sending, the dead become fiends, monsters twisted by lingering attachment to life they no longer possess. Yuna dances to give them peace, to ensure their suffering ends rather than continues in corrupted form. And Tidus watches, understanding that this is also part of her duty, that summoners are not just warriors but priests, not just fighters but shepherds of souls. The temple at Kilika is damaged but functional, and Yuna completes its trials to gain her second Aeon. She emerges exhausted, the process of bonding with the Fayth clearly taking enormous mental and spiritual toll, but she does not complain, does not express anything except gratitude for the power she has gained and determination to continue forward. This is what being a summoner means. Tidus is beginning to understand. Constant sacrifice, constant burden, constant giving, until there is nothing left to give. And everyone treats this as admirable rather than tragic, as calling rather than curse. They travel to Luca next, the largest city Tidus has yet seen in Spira, though still tiny compared to the Zanarkand he remembers. Luca means the Blitzball tournament, the reason Waka recruited Tidus in the first place. And for a few hours Tidus can pretend he is just an athlete again, just a player focused on winning, rather than a guardian helping someone march toward death. The stadium is familiar in ways nothing else in Spira has been. The rituals of sport providing structure that requires no explanation, no cultural context beyond the universal language of competition. But sin intrudes even here. During the match, monsters attack the stadium, and Tidus finds himself fighting alongside someone he recognizes. Auron, who disappeared in Zanarkand's destruction, who Tidus assumed was dead or lost, stands in the middle of chaos looking exactly as he did before, unchanged and unexplaining. He gives Tidus orders with the authority of someone who expects obedience, treats the situation like he knew it was coming, like everything is proceeding according to plan, only Tidus has not been informed of. Auron reveals himself as Braska's former guardian, someone who travelled with Yuna's father and Jek 10 years ago, someone who survived that pilgrimage when summoners and their guardians are not supposed to survive. The attackers are Sinspawn, the same creatures Tidus fought in Zanarkand during Sin's assault. Their appearance in Luca suggests Sin is specifically targeting Yuna's party, or perhaps targeting Tidus specifically, demonstrating awareness and intention beyond mindless destruction. The attack is repelled with help from Maester Seymour, a high-ranking religious figure who summons an aeon of terrible power called Anima. Seymour is young to be Maester, half Guado and half human, and he carries himself with a formality that borders on otherworldly. His interest in Yuna is immediate and obvious, but also strange, weighted with significance Tidus cannot decipher. Auron forces Tidus to confront uncomfortable truths about his father. Jecht was Braska's guardian, travelled with him to Zanarkand's ruins, helped him gain the final Aeon that defeated Sin. Somewhere in that process, Jecht disappeared, and Auron's careful wording suggests there is more to the story than he is willing to share, that Jecht's fate involves revelations Tidus is not ready to hear. Auron becomes Yuna's guardian, his experience and skill invaluable, but also his knowledge, his understanding of what the pilgrimage truly means and where it leads. He knows the destination, even if he will not fully articulate it, and his presence adds weight to the journey, transforms it from hopeful quest to something darker and more complex. They travel the Miqian high road toward Mushroom Rock, and along the way, Yuna creates a sphere recording. She speaks to it in private, unaware that Tidus is watching, and her words are farewells, final messages to her guardians containing gratitude and apology. She is saying goodbye, Tidus realizes. She knows she will not survive this pilgrimage, knows that defeating sin requires a sacrifice she is prepared to make, and the knowledge sits in his stomach like ice. This is not adventure. This is not heroic quest. This is a young woman walking toward death with full awareness and acceptance, and everyone around her is helping her do it because they believe there is no alternative. At Mushroom Rock Road, they witness Operation Miyihen, a massive military operation designed to defeat sin using machina weapons, technology forbidden by Yevon doctrine, but desperate times make for flexible theology. The Crusaders, the military arm of society, have partnered with the Al-Bed to create weapons powerful enough to challenge sin directly, and hundreds of warriors gather to execute a plan that represents everything Yuna's pilgrimage is meant to make unnecessary. If Operation Miyihen succeeds, if technology can defeat sin, where summoners have always failed, then perhaps Yuna does not need to sacrifice herself. Perhaps there is another way after all. What the soldiers do not know, what only becomes clear later, is that this operation was sanctioned by Meister Kinnock and Seymour Guado as political theatre, a trap designed to demonstrate the futility of opposing Yevon's traditional methods. They knew it would fail. They allowed hundreds of men to march toward certain death, not despite knowing the outcome, but because of it, using their lives as proof that only summoners can defeat sin, that questioning Yevon's teachings leads only to disaster. The cynicism of it, the calculated sacrifice of people treated as expendable pawns in religious power games, reveals the rot at Yevon's heart more clearly than any sermon or doctrine. But the operation fails spectacularly anyway, even beyond what the Meisters intended. Sin tears through the Crusaders and their machina like they are paper, demonstrating that technology is insufficient, that human weapons cannot match the monster's power, that the only path remains the one Yuna walks. The aftermath is carnage on a scale that makes Kilika's destruction seem minor. Bodies litter the road, dying men cry out for help that cannot come, and Yuna performs another sending, this one for hundreds of souls rather than dozens, dancing amid blood and debris while fireflies rise like falling stars going in reverse. Waka watches the destruction of his former comrades, the Crusaders he left to become Yuna's guardian, and his faith in Yevon's teachings is shaken but not broken, his certainty that the old ways are best eroded but not destroyed. They reach the Josei temple, and Yuna gains another aeon. But the mood of the party has shifted. The operation's failure proves that sin cannot be defeated through military means, that Yuna's path is the only path, but it also highlights the futility of that path because even if she succeeds, even if she defeats sin, the victory will be temporary, the calm will end, and another summoner will need to make the same journey, accept the same fate. It is a cycle without resolution, a spiral of sacrifice that continues because it has always continued, because no one knows how to break it, because breaking it would require questioning foundations Spira's entire society is built upon. The Moonflow crossing is beautiful, the river wide and serene, traversed on the backs of massive shoop of creatures that move through water with ponderous grace. Yuna is kidnapped by Al-Bed during the crossing, grabbed by machinery and dragged beneath the surface, and Tidus dives after her without hesitation, fighting through underwater machina to reach her before she is taken beyond retrieval. When he surfaces with her, when they are reunited on the Shupav's back, she thanks him with sincerity that makes the danger worthwhile, and he begins to understand that his role is not just muscle and swordsmanship, but presence, being someone who treats her not as symbol or sacrifice, but as person worth rescuing for her own sake. The Albed who attempted the kidnapping is revealed to be Riku, the girl who rescued Tidus from the ruins. She joins the party as Yuna's guardian, after confessing that the Albed have been kidnapping summoners to prevent them from completing pilgrimages, trying to save them from the death everyone else accepts as necessary. Riku is Yuna's cousin, family through Yuna's Albed mother, and her presence creates tension because Waka hates the Albed with a passion born of prejudice and pain, his brother having been killed by Machina, his faith teaching that technology is sin given form. Yuna accepts Riku anyway, welcomes her with warmth that suggests she has always wanted family close, but never dared ask for it. They arrive at Guadosalam, home of the Guado people, a non-human race led by Meister Seymour. His manner is smooth, his hospitality impeccable, and his interest in Yuna has intensified into something resembling courtship. He proposes marriage, suggesting that their union would unite human and Guado, would symbolize Spira's various races coming together in common cause. Yuna is uncertain, overwhelmed by attention she does not desire but cannot refuse without creating political incident, and Seymour senses her hesitation with satisfaction that suggests her discomfort is part of his plan, rather than obstacle to it. Before she can give answer, the party visits the far plane, a place where the living can communicate with the dead. Yuna speaks with her parents' spirits, seeking guidance, asking them what she should do, whether marriage to Seymour serves her pilgrimage or complicates it. But something goes wrong. Jiskel, Seymour's father, appears unbidden, clearly distressed, dropping a sphere that he cannot hold because he is spirit, rather than flesh. His appearance suggests he is unsent, a ghost who has not been guided to rest. An unsent appearing unbidden is never a good sign. The sphere contains evidence of murder. Seymour killed his father to inherit his position as Meister, assassinated him to gain power and influence needed for whatever plans he has conceived. Yuna watches the sphere in horror, recognizing that the man proposing marriage is patricide and murderer, that accepting his proposal would chain her to monster wearing civilized mask. But she says nothing, reveals the sphere to no one except Tidus, who stumbles upon her viewing it, and when she announces she will accept Seymour's proposal, her guardians are confused and disturbed, but ultimately accepting, because protecting summoners means respecting summoners' choices, even when those choices seem insane. They travel through the Thunder Plains, a region where lightning strikes constantly, drawn by towers the Albed built generations ago, technology repurposed by civilization that fears it into defensive system that feels more like natural disaster given schedule. Yuna is terrified of thunder, flinching with each strike, and Tidus tries to distract her with laughter, teaching her to laugh at her fear rather than simply endure it. Their laughter is forced at first, awkward and self-conscious, but it becomes genuine, becomes a moment of connection deeper than fear or duty, becomes something that feels like hope manifesting through absurdity. Macalania Temple sits in a frozen forest, ice coating everything, creating beauty that feels fragile and temporary. Seymour waits for them there, and Yuna confronts him with knowledge of his crime, demanding he submit to judgment, demanding he face consequences for his father's murder. Seymour's response is violence. He summons Anima, his terrifying Aeon, and attacks with intent to kill everyone except Yuna, who he intends to claim regardless of her consent. The battle is desperate, Seymour's power vast and terrible, but Yuna has gained strength through her pilgrimage, her aeons matching his, her guardians fighting with ferocity born of protecting someone they love. They defeat him, kill him, and the realization of what they have done settles like lead in their stomachs. They have murdered a master. Regardless of Seymour's crimes, regardless of his intentions, they have killed one of Yevon's highest religious figures, and that makes them traitors, criminals whose execution will be demanded by the very institution they thought they served. Yuna attempts to send Seymour, to guide his spirit to the far plane and prevent him becoming unsent, but the Guado guards intervene, carrying his body away before the ritual can complete, ensuring he remains in world he should have left, ensuring his spirit persists with all the power and malice it possessed in life. They flee into Macalania woods, pursued by temple guards, hunted by the religious authority they believed protected them. In a hidden spring, away from pursuit for moment that feels stolen from time itself, Yuna breaks down. The weight of everything, the pilgrimage, the marriage proposal, Seymour's murder, her impending death, all of it crashes down at once, and she collapses sobbing into Tidus's arms. He holds her, whispers that she does not have to do this, that she can quit her pilgrimage, that there must be another way. And for first time since accepting her destiny, Yuna allows herself to imagine living, allows herself to want something beyond duty and sacrifice. They kiss in the spring, surrounded by water and trees, in moment, suspended between past and future. It is tentative and desperate at once, expression of feelings neither has fully acknowledged, connection formed through shared trauma and shared hope. The water ripples around them, disturbed by their movement. Moonlight filters through branches overhead. In that moment, they are not summoner and guardian, not duty and protection, just two 17-year-olds trying to hold on to something beautiful in world that seems designed to destroy beauty whenever it appears. And then the moment ends because moments always end, and reality reasserts itself in form of temple guards catching up, sin appearing overhead, the ice beneath them cracking as the woods begin to collapse. Sin's arrival is not attack but rescue, impossibly. Inside the monster, Jecht recognizes that his son is in danger, recognizes that Yuna matters to Tidus in ways that mirror how Tidus's mother mattered to him, and some fragment of will that persists despite Yu Yevon's control reaches out to protect them. It pulls them into itself, swallows them in light and chaos, transporting them away from the guards and toward the next stage of their journey. This is love expressed through the only means available to someone trapped in monstrous form. Father protecting son through action that looks like destruction but serves as salvation. When consciousness returns, they are scattered across the desert of Bikanel, separated from each other, alone in wasteland that offers no shelter or answers. Tidus wakes to confusion and heat, searching for his companions, finding instead an oasis that should not exist in desert this barren. He is met by Al-Bed, who recognize him from before, Riku's people, who transport him to their settlement called home. Home is marvel of technology and defiance, an Al-Bed city built in desert where Yevon's reach cannot easily extend, where machina are celebrated rather than condemned, where children grow up learning engineering alongside language, where progress is virtue rather than sin. The Al-Bed have made themselves refuge for those who question Yevon's teachings, sanctuary for those who refuse to accept that suffering and sacrifice are the only paths available. Tidus is welcomed with warmth that suggests the Al-Bed know more about him than they have revealed, that his connection to Riku and Yuna marks him as friend despite his ignorance of their culture. But home is under attack. Guado forces, led by the supposedly dead Seymour now existing as unsent, assault the settlement with ferocity that speaks to religious hatred given military form. This is retaliation, Tidus learns. The Guado serve Meister Seymour, and after Yuna killed him at Macalania Temple, after her guardians murdered a high-ranking member of Yevon's clergy, the religious authorities branded them traitors deserving of death. The Albed sheltered them, refused to surrender them to Yevon's judgment, and now they pay the price for that defiance. The assault is not just military necessity, but punishment, demonstration of what happens to those who harbor heretics, warning to any other faction that might consider opposing Yevon's will. The Albed fight back with weapons that should give them advantage, machina powerful enough to challenge trained warriors, but technology proves insufficient against numbers and zealotry combined. Buildings burn, people die, and the Albed leadership makes terrible decision born of terrible necessity. They will evacuate everyone they can, load ships with children and elders and anyone who cannot fight, and then they will destroy home themselves, detonate the entire settlement to deny Yevon the satisfaction of its conquest. Tidus fights through the chaos searching for Yuna, learns she is in the compound's restricted areas, finds guardians scattered and desperate, but alive. They reunite piece by piece, Lulu and Auron and Waka and Kimari, all of them battered but functional, all of them focused on finding Yuna before the destruction consumes everything. When they finally reach her, when they break through the chamber where she is held, she is with summoners. Dozens of summoners the Albed have kidnapped over years, kept prisoner not from cruelty, but from desperate love, from refusal to watch more young people march toward death, because tradition demands it. Riku's involvement in the kidnapping is revealed fully now. Her participation in operations designed to save summoners from themselves, and Waka's faith shatters completely. Everything he believed, all the certainty that guided his actions and judgments, crumbles in the face of evidence that the Albed he hated were trying to prevent the very tragedies Yevon sanctifies. His brother died fighting with machina weapons because the Crusaders had no other choice, because Yevon's traditional methods are insufficient against sin, and the religion Waka devoted his life to condemn Chapu for the heresy of trying to survive. The realization breaks something in Waka, leaves him raw and angry and searching for new foundation to stand on, now that the old has proven hollow. They escape home on an airship, ancient machina that should not function after centuries of disuse, but does anyway, because the Albed have maintained it in secret, preserving the possibility of flight in world that forgot it could rise above its problems. The ship carries refugees and summoners and Yuna's party, lifting them away from home's destruction, away from the desert and toward Bevelle, Yevon's holy city, where Seymour has announced he will wed Yuna in ceremony, designed to cement his power and her complicity. The Albed protest, argue that flying directly into heart of religious authority is suicide, but Yuna is resolute. She will face Seymour, will stop him, will prevent him from using her as tool for whatever ambitions drive his unsent malice. Bevelle is grand in ways that make Lucca seem provincial, city of temples and towers built on foundations of faith and control, where Yevon's power is absolute and questioning is heresy given physical form as exile or death. The wedding is spectacle, ceremony broadcast across Spira, so everyone can witness the Meister's marriage to High Summoner Braska's daughter, union that symbolizes continuity and legitimacy, that suggests Seymour inherits not just political power, but spiritual authority through connection to the man who brought the last calm. Yuna stands at the altar in wedding dress that feels like burial shroud, face composed but eyes screaming, and her guardians watch from hiding, waiting for moment to intervene. When Yuna is given opportunity to speak, to say the words that would bind her to Seymour, she does something unexpected. She summons, right there in the middle of the ceremony, in the heart of Yevon's power, she calls forth an Aeon and uses it not as weapon but as tool, commanding it to grab her and carry her away from the altar, from Seymour, from the trap closing around her. The escape attempt is short-lived but glorious in its audacity, demonstration that even surrounded by overwhelming power, even facing religious and political authority combined, she refuses to surrender agency, refuses to become tool for someone else's purposes. They are captured, of course, summoner and guardians both, arrested by Yevon's warrior monks and dragged before the Meisters for judgment. The trial is formality, conclusion predetermined, but what it reveals is more significant than the sentence it delivers. The Meisters, the highest religious authorities in Spira, the embodiment of Yevon's will and wisdom, are dead. Not recently deceased but long dead, existing as unsent for years or decades or generations, spirits clinging to power they refuse to relinquish, ghosts ruling the living because no one dared question whether those who led them still drew breath. The revelation is devastating in its implications. Everything about Yevon, all the teachings about the sending and the importance of guiding spirits to rest, all of it is hypocrisy practiced by leaders who exempt themselves from the very rules they enforce on others. Meister Mika, leader of the Yevon Council, ancient and terrible in his unsent state, condemns them to Via Purifico, the temple's underwater prison from which escape is considered impossible. The party is separated, guardians sent to one area, Yuna to another. Isolation designed to break their will and ensure they cannot coordinate resistance. But Yuna is summoner, and summoners have power beyond what prison designers anticipated. She calls her Aeons, uses them to fight through the complex, reunites with guardians who have fought their own battles through flooded corridors and ancient machinery, and together they escape from prison that was supposed to be their tomb. They emerge into Bevelle Temple's Cloister of Trials, the sacred space where summoners must prove themselves worthy, and Yuna continues her pilgrimage despite everything, despite being criminal and fugitive, despite knowing the institution she serves is corrupted beyond redemption. She completes the trials and gains Bahamut, the most powerful Aeon available to summoners before reaching Zanarkand, and when she emerges, she is exhausted but determined, resolved to continue forward, because stopping now would make everything meaningless, would reduce all the sacrifice to nothing. Seymour confronts them atop Bevelle Temple, his unsent form crackling with power unrestrained by mortality's limits, his ambitions revealed in words that mix megalomania with genuine suffering. He wants to become sin. He wants to merge with the monster, become the destroyer, end all life on Spira, because existence is suffering and death is mercy. His philosophy was forged in childhood trauma that no one should endure. His mother was human, rejected by Guado for her choice to marry outside her race, and young Seymour was despised as half-breed, neither fully Guado nor fully human, belonging nowhere, wanted by no one. He watched his mother suffer for loving his father, watched her be ostracized and scorned, and when she could bear it no longer, she made a choice that broke him completely. She sacrificed herself to become Fayth for Anima, transformed herself into eternal dream so her son could have power, could summon an Aeon so terrible that no one would dare harm him again, could be strong enough to survive in a world that hated him for his mixed heritage. Seymour learned from this that sacrifice is the only expression of love Spira understands, that everything valuable requires someone's death, that the greatest gift a parent can give a child is to die for them in ways that provide tangible benefit. He has decided to extend that logic to its ultimate conclusion, to become the ultimate parent to all of Spira by killing everyone, releasing all souls from cycle of suffering that defines existence in world where sin ensures peace is always temporary. If sacrifice is virtue, if death is gift, then killing everyone becomes the ultimate act of mercy, the final expression of love that ends all pain by ending all capacity to feel pain. The battle with Seymour is brutal, his power amplified by his unsent state, his tactics refined by madness that sees murder as sacrament. They defeat him again, but again he escapes final death, his spirit persisting because no one can perform the sending while fighting for survival, because his guards whisk his form away before Yuna can complete the ritual that would force him to rest. He will return, they know, will continue pursuing Yuna and his insane plan until someone finds way to permanently end him. The calm lands stretch before them, vast grassland that serves as gateway to sacred mountain Gagazet and Zanarkand beyond. This is where summoners from across Spira gather to train, to prepare for the final trials, to say goodbye to companions before attempting the climb that many do not survive. The land is beautiful in its emptiness, space that allows contemplation, room to breathe after cities and temples and constant crisis. Yuna spends time here relearning how to simply exist, talking with her guardians, laughing with Tidus, allowing herself moments of joy before continuing toward end she knows awaits. They meet more summoners here, other young people on the same journey, all of them marked by the same knowledge of what awaits at pilgrimage's end. Some are confident, others terrified, but all are resolved because turning back means condemning Spira to continue suffering without even attempting to bring the calm. The camaraderie among summoners is complex, mixing support with competition, friendship with awareness that only one can succeed because only one sin exists to defeat at any given time. They are peers and rivals, allies and obstacles, united by shared burden, but separated by the nature of their quest. The cavern of the stolen Fayth offers detour, ancient chamber where Fayth disappeared generations ago, replaced by something wrong that calls to summoners with voice that promises power but delivers corruption. Yuna insists on investigating, and what they find is another Aeon, one not bound to any temple, existing free but tainted by something they cannot identify. Yuna forms the pact anyway, gains another ally for the battles ahead, but the encounter leaves everyone unsettled, aware that forces they do not understand are manipulating events in ways that serve purposes beyond their comprehension. The Ronso inhabit Mount Gagazet, blue-furred people who guard the path to Zanarkand, who serve as gatekeepers, ensuring only those worthy attempt the final trials. Kimahri is Ronso. Though he left his tribe years ago after being shamed in combat, his horn broken by rival Biran, who claimed superiority through victory. Now Kimahri must face his tribe, must prove himself worthy despite his disgrace, must demonstrate that the years spent protecting Yuna have made him strong enough to earn respect. He was denied. The confrontation with Biran is personal and painful, validation sought and given through combat that leaves both warriors bloodied but reconciled. Kimahri's honor restored through demonstration of his growth. The mountain is sacred, every step taken on slopes where generations of summoners have walked before, where many have fallen and their spirits supposedly linger to offer guidance or warning. The climb is physically demanding, altitude and cold combining with fiends drawn to the mountain's spiritual significance, but it is mentally exhausting in ways more profound than physical challenge. This is the final approach. Beyond Gagazet lies Zanarkand, and beyond Zanarkand lies confrontation with sin, and beyond that lies either calm or death. And everyone knows these are not actually alternatives because summoner bringing the calm is summoner who has died. The two outcomes inseparable in ways no one has explained, but everyone understands. At the mountain's peak, they encounter something called the Fayth scar, place where fireflies gather in such concentration that reality becomes thin, where boundary between dream and waking blurs into permeability. A boy appears, or the image of boy, speaking with voice that belongs to more than one person, representing something collective rather than individual. He is Fayth, or speaks for the Fayth, and he knows Tidus, knows what Tidus is in ways Tidus himself does not yet understand. The boy tells truth that shatters everything Tidus believed about his existence. Dream Zanarkand is not real city. It is creation of the Fayth, collective dream sustained by thousands of people who transformed themselves into eternal dreamers 1,000 years ago, when the original Zanarkand was destroyed. They dreamed the city into existence, populated it with people who think themselves real, who live and love and die without knowing they are imagination given false flesh. Tidus is one of those dream people, his entire existence nothing more than thought held in the minds of sleeping dead, his life and memories and personality all constructed from collective unconscious of Fayth who dream him into being every morning and sustain him through every day. This is why he survived Sin's attack on Dream Zanarkand. This is why he appeared in Spira 1,000 years after his city fell. Sin came to Dream Zanarkand and pulled him out, brought him into real world, where he does not belong, where his existence is sustained only by proximity to Sin and the Fayth's continued dreaming. When Sin is defeated, when the Fayth are finally released from their 1,000-year dreaming, Dream Zanarkand will fade, and everything in it will cease to exist, including Tidus. Defeating Sin means erasing himself from reality, ensuring his own death, or rather unbecoming, dissolution back into the dream stuff that formed him. The revelation destroys Tidus as thoroughly as any physical attack could. Everything he is, everything he believes himself to be, his memories and personality and the entire life he thought he lived, all of it is lie, or not lie exactly, but something worse, something that was never true in the first place. He is not real, has never been real, cannot become real because reality is not something dreams can graduate into. He wants to deny it, wants to reject the boy's words as madness, but he cannot because the explanation fits too perfectly, resolves too many inconsistencies, makes sense of his existence in ways that prove themselves through their very coherence. Yuna holds him as he breaks down, whispers that real or dream he matters, that the person he is exists regardless of the substance composing him, that she loves him whether he is flesh or imagination. But her words, however sincere, cannot quite reach the void opening inside him, cannot bridge the gap between existence and non-existence that he now stands over, cannot make him feel solid when he has just learned he is made of nothing more substantial than sleeping thoughts. They continue down the mountain because there is no alternative, because stopping would mean accepting defeat, because Yuna's pilgrimage continues regardless of Tidus's crisis, and he is her guardian whether he is real or not. The descent is quiet, everyone processing the revelation in their own way, trying to understand what it means for their quest and their friend, and the world they thought they understood. If Dream Zanarkand exists, what else might be false? If Fayth can dream entire cities into being, what other impossibilities might underlie the reality they take for granted? Zanarkand ruins stretch before them when they finally arrive. Vast complex of shattered buildings and broken monuments. The original city that fell 1,000 years ago. The place dream Zanarkand was created to remember and preserve. This is where High Summoner Braska came to gain the final Aeon. This is where Yuna's father sacrificed himself to bring the calm. This is where Jek disappeared 10 years ago, and where Yuna will transform into something capable of defeating sin. And everyone knows this means she will die, and no one can find words to acknowledge what they know without making it real through speech. The trials here are more intense than any temple they have visited. Challenges designed to test summoners to their absolute limits, to ensure only those worthy gain audience with the final Aeon. Yuna progresses through them with determination that borders on obsession, focused on reaching the end, on completing what she has travelled so far to achieve. Her guardians follow, supporting her through challenges, fighting fiends drawn to the ruins by spiritual residue of the ancient city, and slowly, inevitably, they approach the moment that will define everything. Lady Yunalesca waits at the ruin's heart, the first summoner who ever defeated sin, the woman who pioneered the method of bringing the calm. She is daughter of Yu Yevon, the ancient summoner who led Zanarkand before its fall, who became something more and less than human in his desperation to preserve what remained of his beloved city. Yunalesca has existed as unsent for 1,000 years, maintaining the system her father created, guiding other summoners through the process she discovered when she defeated the first sin. She is elegant and terrible, both welcoming and intimidating, and she explains what the final summoning actually requires, what secret every summoner learns too late to turn back. The final Aeon is created from one of the summoner's guardians. Someone Yuna loves must die, must sacrifice themselves to become the weapon she will use against sin. Their bond, their affection and trust becomes the foundation for transformation that makes them powerful enough to defeat the monster. Yuna must choose which of her guardians she will kill. Which of the people who have protected her and travelled with her will be unmade, so their essence can be forged into final Aeon. And after she defeats sin using this weapon created from someone she loves, after the calm begins and Spira celebrates her victory, she will die. The final summoning consumes the summoner, ensures their death is the price paid for temporary peace. But even that is not the truth, or not the whole truth. Yunalesca continues, explains that sin cannot be permanently defeated because sin is not actually a monster, but a suit, armor worn by Yu Yevon himself. Her father did not die when Zanarkand fell. He transformed himself into something beyond death, became living spell that possesses the final Aeon after it defeats sin's current incarnation. The guardian who becomes final Aeon, the person Yuna sacrifices, will defeat sin and then become sin, their transformed body taken over by Yu Yevon and turned into the next incarnation of the monster. This is why sin always returns. This is why the calm is temporary, because every victory creates the next sin. Every summoner who succeeds in their quest transforms their most beloved companion into the thing they fought to defeat. Yunalesca maintains this system, not despite knowing its true nature, but because of it, continuing her father's work, even though that work ensures perpetual suffering, because she cannot imagine alternative and has spent 1,000 years ensuring no one else imagines one either. Jekt became sin. Tidus's father, who travelled with Braska and became the final Aeon, defeated sin and then was possessed by Yu Yevon, transformed into the current incarnation of the monster. This is why sin appeared at Dream Zanarkand, why it specifically targeted Tidus, because some part of Jecht still existed within the monster, some fragment of consciousness that recognized his son, that reached out to him across the impossible distance between dream and reality, that pulled him into Spira, so Tidus could witness what his father had become. Sin has been following them because Jecht has been following them, watching his son and trying to communicate through the limitations of his monstrous form. The revelation recontextualizes everything. Every attack they witnessed, every appearance Sin made, all of it was Jecht trying to reach Tidus, trying to make his son understand that he did not abandon him, that he became something terrible, not from choice, but from sacrifice, that he has spent 10 years trapped in a body designed for destruction, watching himself murder thousands while powerless to stop it. The tragedy is so complete, so absolute, that for moments no one can speak, cannot find words sufficient to acknowledge what they have learned. Yuna expects Yuna to choose. She has explained the process, revealed the cost, and now she waits for Yuna to select which guardian will become final Aeon, which loved one will be sacrificed so the cycle can continue, so Spira can have another 10 years of peace before the next summoner must make the same choice. But Yuna refuses, not angrily, not with dramatic declaration, but quietly, firmly, with absolute conviction. She will not choose. She will not sacrifice her friends. She will not perpetuate a system that requires death to function, that treats people as fuel to be consumed in maintaining pretense of victory. If defeating sin means becoming sin, then defeating sin is not victory. It is simply continuation of the same tragedy with different actors. Yuna is offended by the refusal, insulted that Yuna would reject the path every summoner before her has walked, that she would question the system Yuna herself created and has maintained for millennium. She argues that without the final summoning, Spira has no hope, that sin will continue destroying forever, that the calm is better than nothing, even if temporary. But Yuna is resolute, and her guardians support her, agree that perpetuating cycle is not acceptable even if breaking it means facing uncertainty. They would rather risk everything trying to find new way than accept that the only option is variations on the same sacrifice. Yuna attacks. She will not allow summoners to leave without accepting her guidance, will not permit the cycle to be broken, will not tolerate rejection of the system she has dedicated her 1,000-year existence to maintaining. The battle is desperate. Yuna power vast after millennium of existence as unsent. Her attacks mixing physical and magical devastation in combinations designed to overwhelm, through variety, as much as strength. But Yuna and her guardians have grown strong through their journey, have learned to fight together, to support each other, to be more than some of their individual capabilities. They defeat Yuna, destroy her utterly, and with her death goes the possibility of any future summoner obtaining the final Aeon, of anyone else perpetuating the cycle she defended. But victory leaves them with more problems than solutions. They have closed the path Spira has relied on for 1,000 years. They have eliminated the only known method of defeating sin. And sin is still out there, still destroying, still Jecht trapped in monstrous form. And they have no idea how to free him or stop the creature without the final summoning they just rejected. They have chosen hope over certainty, possibility over tradition, but hope does not come with instructions, does not provide roadmap for achieving what has never been achieved before. The Fayth boy appears again, speaks for the collective dreamers who have sustained Dream Zanarkand for millennium. They are tired. They have been dreaming for 1,000 years, sustaining entire city and all its inhabitants through continuous effort, that never allows rest, and they want to stop, want to finally die and rest, want to release Dream Zanarkand and everyone in it back to the nothing they were created from. But they cannot stop while Yevon persists, because Yevon is the one who commands them to dream, the one who binds them to their eternal task. He does not consciously direct the dream's contents anymore, has become too abstracted for that level of control, reduced to pure instinct and compulsion. But his will persists, that single overwhelming imperative. Keep dreaming, Zanarkand. Preserve what was lost. Never let the city die completely. Everything, the city and the Fayth and sin itself, all of it traces back to Yevon's obsessive determination to preserve Zanarkand in some form, even if that form is dream, even if maintaining it requires becoming monster, even if the cost is 1,000 years of suffering for all of Spira. This provides the answer they need, the method of defeating sin that does not require final summoning. They must enter sin, physically travel inside the monster, reach Yevon at its core and destroy the ancient summoner, break his hold on the Fayth and free them from their 1,000-year dreaming. When Yevon dies, sin will die with him, permanently this time, without creating new incarnation, because there will be no final aeon for him to possess. The Fayth will stop dreaming, Dream Zanarkand will fade, and Tidus will cease to exist, but sin will be defeated permanently, the cycle finally broken after millennium of repetition. Tidus accepts this with resignation and determination mixed together. He knew his existence was temporary from the moment he learned he was dream. Now he knows exactly when and how that existence will end, and he can either spend his remaining time in fear, or he can use it to accomplish something meaningful, ensure his disappearance serves purpose beyond simple dissolution. He chooses meaning, chooses to help defeat sin and free his father, and break the cycle, even if it costs him everything, because the alternative is continuing to exist, while knowing he could have made difference but chose not to, because he was afraid. Yuna cannot accept it as easily. She has just discovered she loves Tidus, has just acknowledged feelings she suppressed throughout the pilgrimage, because summoners are not supposed to fall in love when they know they will die. Now she learns that he will disappear, that even if she survives defeating sin, even if they break the cycle and bring permanent peace, Tidus will not be there to share it, will fade from existence along with Dream Zanarkand and everything it contains. The unfairness of it, the cruelty of finally allowing herself to love someone only to learn she will lose him anyway, breaks her composure completely. But she does not ask him to choose differently, does not demand he prioritize his existence over Spira's salvation. She loves him enough to accept his choice even as it destroys her. They prepare to enter sin using the airship, the ancient machina, serving them one final time, carrying them toward confrontation with the monster that has defined Spira's existence for millennium. The approach is tense, sin's massive form filling the sky, its presence warping space around it in ways that make navigation nearly impossible. But they find the entrance, locate the orifice through which they can access sin's interior, and they descend into darkness that feels like falling into oblivion, into space that should not exist, because monsters should not have interiors this vast, this complex. Inside sin is nightmare-made architecture. Passages that twist in ways geometry should not allow, chambers filled with sin spawn and fiends drawn to or created by the monster's power, gravity that shifts and changes depending on location, making navigation exercise in constant readjustment. They fight through it all, pushing deeper, seeking the core where Jekt must be imprisoned. where Yu Yevon resides in his eternal possession of the final Aeon's transformed body. The path is marked by memories, by images that seem to be Jecht's recollections surfacing through Sin's bulk. Moments from the past bleeding through into present, as if the monster itself is trying to tell them something. They find the Al Bhed airship inside Sin, swallowed at some point and preserved in the monster's gut like a meal never fully digested. Sid and the Al Bhed crew are alive, impossibly, and they join the assault, provide fire support and transportation through Sin's interior, transform what seemed like impossible solo mission into coordinated assault by everyone who has reason to oppose the cycle. The Al Bhed have watched summoners die for generations, have tried to save them through kidnapping and intervention, and now they have chance to end the system permanently, to ensure no more summoners must choose between sacrifice and guilt. At Sin's core they find Jecht, not the Jecht of Tidus's memories, not his father as he once was, but something transformed, amalgamated with Sin's power into form that is human and monster blended beyond separation. He is conscious, barely, fighting against Yu Yevon's control with whatever shred of will remains after decade as the destroyer. He recognizes Tidus, speaks to his son with words that hurt because they carry affection. Tidus never heard when his father was alive, praise and pride that Jecht never expressed, before because he did not know how, because showing emotion felt like weakness, and Jecht could not permit himself weakness. The man who mocked his son's tears, who called him crybaby and pushed him away rather than offering comfort, speaks now with raw honesty that comes from having nothing left to lose. He tells Tidus he is sorry. Sorry for the years of harsh words and impossible standards. Sorry for making a child feel inadequate rather than loved. Sorry for not knowing how to be father in ways that did not involve preparing his son for harsh world through harshness itself. He thought he was making Tidus strong. He thought criticism and distance would forge resilience. He was wrong. He knows that now. Understands that strength without love is just cruelty wearing a different mask. He has had 10 years trapped inside Sin to think about his failures. 10 years watching himself destroy cities, while powerless to stop it. 10 years of clarity purchased through the worst kind of imprisonment. He asks Tidus to kill him. Not as plea from victim, but as request from father to son, asking for mercy that only someone he loves can provide. He has been Sin for 10 years, has murdered thousands, has destroyed cities and families while trapped inside body he cannot control, and he wants it to end, wants death that should have come when he became the final Aeon, but was denied by Yu Yevon's possession. And he wants Tidus specifically to do it, wants his son to be the one who frees him, because that transforms the act from murder to mercy, from defeat to release, from ending to gift. One final lesson he can teach, one final way he can help his son grow, even if that lesson comes through his own death. The battle with Jecht is terrible, not because of its difficulty, but because of its emotional weight. Every strike is patricide. Every spell cast is killing someone Tidus loves despite their complicated history, despite the resentment and abandonment issues that define their relationship. Tidus cries as he fights, tears mixing with sweat, his attacks fueled by love and hatred so intertwined they become indistinguishable. This is the father who never hugged him, who never said he was proud, who disappeared when Tidus was 7 and left a void no amount of success could fill. But this is also the father who became Sin to save Spira, who spent 10 years suffering in monstrous form, who used whatever fragments of will remained to protect his son across impossible distances, who brought Tidus to Spira so they could have this final meeting, this chance at resolution, even if resolution means death. Yuna and the other guardians support him. But this is Tidus's battle, his responsibility and his burden, and they let him take the lead even as they provide the backup that makes victory possible. When Jecht finally falls, when the final Aeon's body collapses and begins to dissolve, he smiles. It is the first time Tidus has seen his father smile with genuine warmth, without the mocking edge that usually accompanied Jecht's expressions of approval. He tells Tidus he is proud, that watching him grow through this journey has been a gift that almost made the decade of imprisonment worthwhile, that Tidus has become the man Jecht always hoped he would be, even if Jecht was terrible at communicating that hope when it mattered. The cocky kid who cried at every setback has become someone who stands firm when the world crumbles, who protects those he loves, who faces impossible challenges without fleeing. And then he fades. Not into death exactly, but into release, his spirit finally free to join the fireflies and cycle through the life stream toward whatever comes next. The tension that defined their relationship, the push and pull of resentment and longing, resolves finally into peace. Not perfect peace, too much pain came before for that, but peace nonetheless, acceptance. But they are not finished. Jecht's defeat releases Yu Yevon from the final Aeon's body, reveals the ancient summoner in his true form, no longer hidden within Sin's bulk, but exposed and vulnerable. He is small, pathetic even, a tick-like creature barely recognizable as having once been human, reduced by millennium of obsessive dreaming and possession to something that is more spell than spirit, more concept than consciousness. He does not speak, may no longer be capable of speech, and he immediately begins trying to possess Yuna's Aeons, to continue the cycle by taking over her summons and transforming them into new Sin. The final battle is not against overwhelming power, but against persistence, against enemy who cannot be killed by conventional damage, but must be systematically deprived of everything he tries to possess until he has nothing left to cling to. Yu Yevon possesses each Aeon in turn, and each one must be defeated, destroyed, released from his control through death. That feels like killing friends, like unmake the very beings who have supported Yuna throughout her journey. She summons them one by one, Valifer and Ifrit, and Ixion and Shiva, and Bahamut, and watches her guardians destroy each one, severing her connection to the Fayth, eliminating the power she has gathered through her pilgrimage, leaving her defenseless, except for the people who have chosen to protect her. When all the Aeons are gone, when Yu Yevon has nothing left to possess, he is vulnerable finally, exposed to attacks he cannot counter or escape. The party destroys him utterly, tears apart the ancient summoner who became living spell, ends the existence that should have ended 1,000 years ago when Zanarkand fell, and with his destruction, the Fayth are released. Their 1,000-year dreaming ends, their burden lifted, and they can finally rest, finally die in truth, rather than continue as eternal dreamers maintaining city that was never meant to persist beyond its original destruction. Sin begins to disintegrate. Without Yu Yevon to hold it together, without the final Aeon to serve as its core, the monster tears itself apart from within, its impossible structure collapsing back into the nothingness it should never have emerged from. Light pours from the fractures, blinding and beautiful, and the party escapes on the airship as Sin destroys itself, as the thing that has terrorized Spira for millennium unmakes itself in explosion of light that can be seen from every corner of the world. They emerge into sky cleared of Sin's presence for first time in 1,000 years. Below them, Spira spreads pristine and hopeful, freed from the monster that defined it, released from cycle that demanded sacrifice as price of temporary peace. The eternal calm begins, not 10 years of respite before next summoner's sacrifice, but permanent peace earned through breaking the cycle rather than perpetuating it. Cities can rebuild without fear of destruction. Children can grow up without knowing they might be called to sacrifice themselves. The future is open, undefined, full of possibility instead of predetermined tragedy. But victory is not complete. Dream Zanarkand is fading, the Fayth no longer sustaining it, and everything within it is disappearing, returning to the dream substance that formed it. Tidus can feel it happening, can sense his existence becoming thin, transparent, less real with each moment. He does not have long, hours at most before he dissolves completely, before he stops being person and becomes just memory, just dream that people remember having, without being able to quite recall the details. The airship lands in the ocean, near the ruins of Zanarkand, and Tidus says his goodbyes. Not long speeches, not dramatic declarations, just simple words to each guardian, thanking them for companionship, for treating him like he mattered, even when he was made of nothing but dream stuff. He comes to Yuna last, and she cannot speak, cannot find words that would be sufficient, can only throw herself into his arms and hold him like she can prevent his disappearance through force of will alone. He tells her he loves her, says it plainly, without qualification, even though love confession in moment of permanent goodbye seems cruel, seems like it should make things worse. But he needs her to know, needs her to carry that knowledge forward into the future he will not share with her, needs her to understand that even if he was dream, even if he was never truly real, what he felt for her was as genuine as anything in existence. She tries to respond, tries to say she loves him too, but the words stick in her throat, choked by sobbing that will not allow speech. He pulls away from her gently, steps back, and his body is becoming translucent, light showing through him like he is made of glass or water. The other guardians watch, faces carved from stone because allowing emotion would break them, would transform this moment of necessary loss into something unbearable. Tidus smiles, tries to make it easier for them by pretending he is not afraid, by acting like fading from existence is just another adventure, just another chapter in story that happens to end with his complete dissolution. He waves, casual gesture that should be inadequate for magnitude of goodbye, but somehow makes it worse through its very ordinariness. And then he runs toward the edge of the airship and jumps. He does not fall. Or rather, he falls but also flies, his body drifting through air like weight no longer applies, like gravity has forgotten he exists because he is forgetting he exists, the dream releasing him back to wherever dreams go when they end. Yuna runs to the edge, reaches for him, her hand grasping air where his solid form stood moments before. Her scream is wordless, raw. He fades entirely, becomes nothing, stops existing in any meaningful sense. She collapses. The guardians hold her while the world celebrates peace that cost them everything that mattered. But something else happens in that moment of dissolution, something the Fayth arrange in final act before releasing themselves to rest. The Fayth of Bahamut, speaking for all his sleeping brethren, makes a promise. They cannot keep Tidus in Spira now, cannot sustain dream made real when they themselves are fading into final rest. But perhaps, someday, if the bonds are strong enough, if love persists across the boundary between existence and void, perhaps they can bring him back, not as dream, but as something more permanent. Gift return for the suffering they inflicted by making him dream in the first place. It is not certainty, merely possibility. Hope offered to Yuna and the others as they watch Tidus disappear. The Fayth make no guarantees, promise nothing concrete, but they plant the seed of maybe, and sometimes maybe is enough to keep moving forward when nothing else remains. The eternal calm spreads across Spira. Cities rebuild, people return to villages sin destroyed, families reunite and communities reform around the certainty that the monster will not return, that this peace is permanent in ways previous calms never were. Yevon's authority collapses as the truth about the Meisters spreads, as people learn that their religious leaders were unsent maintaining power through deception, that the teachings they followed were designed to control rather than enlighten. The Fayth does not disappear entirely, too deeply woven into Spira's culture to vanish overnight, but it transforms, splinters into factions that debate what parts are worth preserving and what must be discarded to build something better. The Al-Bed emerge from hiding, no longer persecuted for their use of machina, now that technology is recognized as necessary rather than heretical. They help rebuild devastated areas using tools and knowledge Yevon suppressed for centuries, demonstrating that progress and respect for the planet are not mutually exclusive, that advancement does not require exploitation. Riku becomes bridge between Al-Bed and other cultures, her connections to both sides allowing her to facilitate understanding that previous generations never achieved because they never tried, too comfortable with mutual hatred to question whether it served anyone's interests. Waka and Lulu marry, start family in Besaid, raise children who will never know fear of sin, who will grow up in world where summoners are historians rather than martyrs, where pilgrimage is metaphor rather than death sentence. Waka coaches blitzball and teaches the next generation that while tradition has value, blind adherence to it leads to suffering, that sometimes the greatest act of faith is questioning what you have been told to believe, without examination. He names his son Vidina, which means future in Al-Bed, gesture of reconciliation and hope that his brother would have approved of, that Chapu would have wanted his nephew to carry forward. Kimahri returns to Mount Gagazet and leads his tribe with wisdom earned through journey beyond their mountain, through protecting Summoner and witnessing the cycles breaking. The Ronso begin to rebuild their numbers, decimated by conflicts with Guado during Yevon's final days, and Kimahri ensures they remember that strength is not just physical, that true power comes from knowing when to fight and when to protect, when to stand firm and when to adapt. Auron was already dead, existing as unsent throughout Yuna's pilgrimage, his spirit persisting through sheer determination to fulfill promise made to Braska and Yecht. To protect Braska's daughter through journey her father could not complete without dying. With Sin's defeat and Yu Yevon's destruction, Auron's purpose is fulfilled finally, and he can rest. Yuna performs the sending for him, dances one last time to guide someone she loves to the far plane, and he fades with satisfaction, visible even in his fading fireflies, content that he kept his oath, that he saw Yuna through to victory that broke the cycle rather than perpetuating it. Yuna becomes leader not through title or position, but through respect earned by refusing the easy path, by choosing uncertainty over guaranteed tragedy. She travels Spira as speaker, helping communities navigate the changes, mediating disputes between factions with competing visions of what the new world should become. She does not preach or command, simply shares her story, talks about losing everything and continuing anyway, about choosing hope when certainty would have been simpler, and people listen because her words carry authority born of sacrifice they can understand even if they did not witness it directly. But she carries Tidus's absence like physical wound, invisible scar that never fully heals. She sees him everywhere in the early days, turns expecting to find him standing there with his cocky smile and easy confidence, and the repeated disappointment of finding empty space instead, gradually teaches her that grief is not something you overcome, but something you learn to carry. She speaks to him sometimes, quiet conversations directed at air, telling him about her day, about the world he helped save but cannot witness, about the future he made possible but will never experience. The Guardians worry initially, concerned that she is losing grip on reality, but eventually they understand that this is how she processes loss, how she keeps him present through absence, how she maintains connection to someone who stopped existing but never stopped mattering. 2 years pass in this fashion. Spira rebuilds, transforms, discovers what peace actually means after millennium defined by war against unkillable enemy. The question stops being how to survive sin and becomes how to build society that does not require sin to give it shape. How to find purpose and meaning in world where the central organizing threat has been eliminated. Some struggle with the transition, find peace disorienting after lives structured around crisis. Others flourish, released from fear to pursue dreams that seemed frivolous when tomorrow's survival was uncertain. The world is messy, complicated, full of problems that seem mundane after defeating cosmic horror. But these are problems of living rather than merely surviving, and that distinction matters even when the specific challenges do not feel significant. Then something impossible happens. Yuna hears about someone in Besaid, a young man pulled from the ocean by fishermen, unconscious and unidentifiable but alive. She travels there immediately, hope and dread warring in her chest because she knows it cannot be him, knows Tidus disappeared permanently when the Fayth stopped dreaming, but cannot stop herself from hoping anyway, because hope is what keeps her moving forward through days that sometimes feel like walking through empty rooms. She arrives at Besaid and pushes through the gathered crowd and sees him lying on the beach, sees Tidus, or someone who looks like Tidus, unconscious but breathing, solid and real in ways he was not when he faded. She does not understand how it is possible. The Fayth stopped dreaming. Dreams Zanarkand dissolved. Everything suggests Tidus should be gone permanently beyond possibility of return. But here he is anyway. Impossible resurrection that defies explanation. She runs to him. When he wakes, when his eyes open and focus on her face, she throws herself into his arms, holds him like she can anchor him to existence through force of will, like releasing him might allow whatever miracle brought him back to reverse itself. He is confused, disoriented, his memories fragmented and unclear about what happened between his disappearance and his return, but he knows her immediately, recognizes Yuna, and speaks her name with wonder and relief that suggests he was as desperate to return as she was to have him back. The explanation, when it comes through sphere recordings left by the Fayth, is fragmentary but clear enough. The Fayth of Bahamut, before releasing himself and his brethren to final rest, pooled their remaining power one last time. They gave Tidus one final gift, returned him to Spira as apology for making him dream in the first place, as acknowledgement that he transcended his origins to become genuinely real through his choices and connections. He is not sustained by their dreaming anymore, no longer dependent on their existence to maintain his own. He is simply Tidus now, person rather than dream, granted existence independent of the forces that originally created him. It is miracle born of compassion, impossible gift from beings who were tired but found strength for one final act of mercy before dissolving into final rest. Or perhaps that is just story they tell themselves to make sense of the senseless, narrative imposed on mystery that has no explanation beyond the simple fact that sometimes impossible things happen, that love can reach across boundaries between existence and non-existence, that endings are not always final when people refuse to accept them as such. The truth of how Tidus returned matters less than the fact that he did return, that Yuna gets to keep him, that the sacrifice demanded by breaking the cycle was not absolute after all, that joy can follow sorrow without negating the sorrow or diminishing the joy. They begin to build life together in world they saved, in peace they created through refusal to accept that sacrifice was the only option. It is not simple or easy, rebuilding intimacy after loss, learning to trust that presence is permanent after experiencing dissolution, but they navigate it together because together is how they survived everything else, and survival is what they are best at. Yuna continues her work helping Spira transition, and Tidus joins her, adding his perspective to conversations about building something new, about moving forward without forgetting what was lost along the way. The story of Final Fantasy X is ultimately about cycles and the courage required to break them. Spira was trapped in spiral of death, summoners sacrificing themselves to create temporary peace that guaranteed another summoner would need to sacrifice themselves in future. Endless repetition that served no purpose except its own continuation. Breaking that cycle required questioning everything, rejecting tradition's authority, accepting uncertainty over comfortable lies. It required recognizing that some costs are too high, even when paying them is easier than finding alternative, that perpetuating broken system, because you do not know what else to do, is choice rather than inevitability. Every major revelation in the narrative dismantles another layer of certainty. Tidus learns he is dream. Yuna learns summoners become sin. Everyone learns Meisters are dead. The party discovers Yunalesca's system is designed to perpetuate suffering rather than end it. Each revelation requires reconceptualizing reality, discarding beliefs that provided comfort and structure, accepting that the foundations they built their understanding on were false or incomplete. This is a terrifying process, destabilizing in ways that threaten to fragment identity. But it is also liberating because lies, however comfortable, restrict possibility, while truth, however painful, creates space for genuine choice. The game's treatment of religion is nuanced, recognizing both its capacity to provide meaning and community and its potential to become a tool for control and exploitation. Yevon offers Spira's people purpose and hope, gives them framework for understanding suffering and rituals for processing grief, creates communities united by shared belief and practice. But it also maintains power through deliberate deception, through suppressing knowledge and technology that might offer alternatives to the cycle, through positioning itself as sole arbiter of truth and morality. The masters preserve their authority by remaining unsent, by refusing to practice what they preach, by demanding sacrifices from others they exempt themselves from making. The game does not condemn faith itself, but rather the perversion of faith into mechanism of control, the transformation of spiritual seeking into rigid dogma that cannot be questioned without inviting punishment. When Yevon collapses, when the truth about the Maester spreads, faith does not disappear but transforms, becomes personal rather than institutional, exploration rather than adherence. People retain spiritual practices that resonate with them while discarding elements that served only to maintain hierarchy and control. This suggests that the problem was never belief, but rather the monopolization of belief, the insistence that only one interpretation is valid and all others are heresy. Tidus's character arc explores questions of identity and authenticity in ways that resonate beyond the fantasy context. Learning you are dream, that your memories and personality are constructed rather than organically developed, creates existential crisis that mirrors real anxieties about selfhood and continuity. We are all, in some sense, constructed from influences and experiences we did not choose, shaped by forces beyond our control, uncertain whether the person we believe ourselves to be reflects some essential truth or is merely narrative we tell ourselves to create coherence from chaos. Tidus's discovery that he is literally dream makes this abstract anxiety concrete, forces him to confront whether he is real in any meaningful sense. The game's answer is that reality is determined by impact rather than origin, by choices made and connections formed rather than substance composing you. Tidus's actions throughout the pilgrimage demonstrate consciousness and agency. His relationships prove capacity for genuine connection. His growth shows ability to change based on experience and reflection. These qualities make him real regardless of whether he is flesh or dream, because being real means having inner life that responds to external circumstances, means being capable of love and fear and hope, and all the other experiences that define existence from the inside. Origin matters less than what you do with existence once you have it. Yuna's journey is one of gradually claiming agency in situation designed to deny her any. As summoner, she is expected to walk predetermined path, make foreordained sacrifice, fulfill role that has been performed by hundreds of predecessors in exactly the same way. Everyone treats her pilgrimage as inevitable, her death as necessary, her choices as already made by virtue of accepting summoner's duty. But Yuna continuously finds small spaces for autonomy, makes decisions that deviate from script even when deviation seems impossible. She chooses her guardians, decides her route, determines her pace, and ultimately refuses the final summoning when everyone expects her to accept it because refusing has never been option before. Her rejection of Yunalesca's system is revolutionary, not because it is violent, but because it is refusal. Simple assertion that she will not participate in cycle regardless of consequences. She does not have alternative plan when she refuses, no clear path to defeating sin without final summoning. But she recognizes that perpetuating broken system is worse than facing uncertainty, that there must be another way even if she cannot currently see it. This is act of faith more profound than anything Yevon teaches. Belief in possibility against all evidence, hope maintained despite lack of guarantee, conviction that people deserve better than eternal recurrence of the same tragedy. The romance between Tidus and Yuna develops with restraint unusual for the genre, building through small moments rather than grand gestures, through understanding communicated in glances and silences as much as words. They are drawn to each other initially through shared displacement, both existing somewhat outside Spira's normal social structures, both navigating world that does not quite accommodate their experiences. Tidus is literal outsider from impossible city. Yuna is summoner elevated above normal social interaction through her sacred duty. And they find in each other someone who sees them as people rather than symbols or mysteries. Their kiss at Macalenia happens not as culmination of romance plot, but as desperate assertion of life and desire in moments when both seem about to be taken from them. It is not declaration of eternal love, but recognition of connection, acknowledgement that they matter to each other, claim to joy in situation designed to deny joy as frivolous distraction from duty. The significance comes not from what it promises about future, but from what it asserts about present, that they are allowed to want things, that their feelings matter even when duty demands they be suppressed, that being summoner and guardian does not erase their humanity or their needs. the supporting cast provides perspectives that complicate rather than simplify the narrative's themes. Waka's journey from prejudice to understanding demonstrates how good people can perpetuate harmful systems through unexamined belief, how faith can become excuse for avoiding difficult questions about whether what you were taught is actually true or just comfortable. His hatred of Albed is genuine, but also convenient, allowing him to blame external enemy for problems that actually trace to structures his own society maintains. His growth comes from confronting evidence that contradicts his beliefs and choosing to accept the evidence rather than dismiss it to preserve his worldview. Lulu's protectiveness of Yuna stems from her own experience losing summoners she loved, watching people she cared about walk toward death while she was powerless to stop them. Her severity with Tidus initially comes from fear that his obvious attachment to Yuna will make her death harder, will create complications that interfere with her ability to complete her pilgrimage. Lulu has learned to manage grief by maintaining emotional distance, by treating summoners as already dead so their actual deaths hurt less. But Tidus's arrival disrupts that coping mechanism by making connection unavoidable, by demonstrating that closing yourself off from pain also means closing yourself off from joy. Auron serves as the voice of experience and bitter wisdom, someone who already walked the path once and knows exactly where it leads. His presence throughout the pilgrimage is both support and warning, help and haunting, because he knows what Yuna will face and cannot prevent it, can only prepare her as much as preparation is possible for inevitable tragedy. His decision to remain unsent, to deny himself final rest in order to protect Yuna through her journey, demonstrates loyalty that transcends death, commitment to promise that persists beyond life's boundaries. But it also shows how guilt can trap people in their worst moments, how inability to forgive yourself can prevent moving forward even when forward is the only direction available. Kimari's quiet devotion to Yuna comes from recognizing in her someone who, like him, does not quite fit the role society expects them to fill. He is Ronso shamed by his broken horn, marked as less than adequate by standards he cannot change. But he chooses to define himself through his actions as guardian, rather than his status within his tribe. His protection of Yuna is not just duty, but kinship, recognition that they are both trying to find their own path within structures designed to limit their choices, both proving their worth through persistence, rather than natural advantage. Riku brings lightness that prevents the narrative from collapsing into unrelenting grimness, her optimism serving as necessary counterweight to the pilgrimage's underlying tragedy. She refuses to accept that any situation is hopeless, maintains belief that solutions exist even when they are not currently visible, and her perspective helps the party recognize that questioning the cycle is not just permissible, but necessary. Her Albed heritage gives her outsider view on Yevon's teachings, allows her to see them as constructed rather than inevitable, and she shares that perspective with others who have never thought to question what they were taught, because everyone around them accepted it as truth. Seymour serves as embodiment of what happens when suffering curdles into nihilism, when pain leads to conclusion that existence itself is the problem, rather than the specific structures that create suffering. His logic is coherent within its own framework. If life means suffering, if peace can only be temporary, if the cycle continues regardless of what individuals do, then perhaps ending life is mercy rather than murder. Perhaps oblivion is gift rather than tragedy. But his conclusion requires dismissing everything that makes suffering worthwhile, all the joy and connection and meaning that exist alongside pain, all the reasons people choose to continue despite knowledge that difficulty is inevitable. The game rejects Seymour's nihilism, not by denying that life includes suffering, but by asserting that suffering does not negate life's value, that difficulty does not invalidate joy, that the presence of pain does not mean existence would be better ended. This is not naive optimism, but rather mature acceptance that life is complicated, that good and bad coexist rather than cancelling each other out, that the presence of problems does not mean solutions are impossible, only that solutions require effort and commitment and willingness to try even when success is uncertain. The final confrontation inside sin serves as physical manifestation of confronting past trauma and present fear simultaneously. They must fight through spaces constructed from Yekt's memories, navigate emotional landscape made literal, face projections of pain and regret that Yekt has carried for decades of imprisonment. This journey becomes metaphor for the work of reconciliation, the necessity of confronting difficult history rather than avoiding it, the recognition that healing requires moving through pain rather than around it. Tidus cannot simply forgive his father without understanding what his father became, cannot reject Yekt without acknowledging the sacrifice that transformation involved. The battle with Yekt is simultaneously patricide and mercy-killing, ending and liberation, violence and love expressed through the same acts. This paradox reflects reality of complicated relationships, how we can love and resent the same person, how anger and affection intertwine in ways that resist simple categorization. Tidus's tears during the fight acknowledge both the pain Yekt caused and the tragedy of what Yekt became, grief for relationship they never had, and loss of relationship they briefly achieved through this final confrontation. It is resolution without reconciliation, ending that does not resolve all the hurt, but provides closure through acknowledgement that the past cannot be changed, only accepted and moved beyond. Yu Yevon's final form as tick-like parasite demonstrates how ideals can survive their original context, continue operating mechanically long after their purpose has been lost or corrupted. He began as summoner trying to preserve Zanarkand, motivated by love for his city and determination that it survive even in diminished form. But somewhere in the process he became simply the mechanism itself, lost whatever humanity drove his original actions, became nothing but the cycle's perpetuation devoid of the meaning that originally justified it. His cautionary tale about how systems can outlive their usefulness, how structures built to serve specific purposes can become ends in themselves, continuing through inertia long after they have stopped serving anyone's actual interests. Defeating Yu Yevon requires destroying all the aeons, sacrificing the powers Yuna has gathered, literally dismantling the tools that were supposed to ensure her victory. This inversion of typical power-up narrative suggests that sometimes strength comes through letting go rather than accumulating, that solving problem requires releasing attachment to solutions that perpetuate the problem's underlying structure. Yuna must accept powerlessness in traditional sense to achieve victory in more fundamental sense, must give up being powerful summoner to become person capable of breaking cycle that summoners perpetuate. The theme of sacrifice permeates the entire narrative, but the game carefully distinguishes between sacrifice that perpetuates broken systems and sacrifice that enables genuine change. The final summoning requires sacrifice, but results only in temporary victory that guarantees next sacrifice will be needed, creating spiral where suffering becomes self-perpetuating mechanism. Breaking the cycle also requires sacrifice, Tidus's dissolution and Yuna's loss, and the parties' acceptance of uncertainty over guaranteed but limited success. But these sacrifices serve to end the need for future sacrifices, rather than ensuring they continue. The distinction matters because it suggests not all sacrifice is equally valuable. That context and outcome determine whether giving something up is noble or merely continuing harmful pattern. Tidus's return in the epilogue can be read multiple ways depending on preference for ambiguity versus closure. Some interpret it as literal resurrection, the Fayth's final gift, impossible miracle that validates the party's choices and rewards them for breaking the cycle. Others see it as Yuna's imagination or dream, her mind creating the reunion she desperately needs, extension of grief rather than actual return. Still others view it as metaphor, suggestion that love persists beyond death or dissolution, that bonds formed through shared struggle cannot be completely severed, even when one person ceases to exist in literal sense. The ambiguity is likely intentional, allowing viewers to find the ending they need rather than imposing single interpretation. Those who want definitive happy ending can accept Tidus's return as real, can believe that sometimes impossible things happen, that love can overcome even dissolution of existence. Those who prefer bittersweet realism can see it as Yuna's continued processing of loss, her refusal to let go manifesting as vision rather than actual reunion, which is sad, but also demonstrates the depth of her love and the way significant loss continues affecting us long after the immediate crisis passes. Both readings are valid because both capture emotional truth, even if they differ on literal facts. The game's visual design reinforces its themes through careful attention to how environments reflect cultural values and priorities. Besaid's small-scale wooden architecture suggests community connected to nature, living within environment's limits rather than trying to dominate it. Luca's industrial sprawl demonstrates how technology can serve human needs, create spaces for joy and competition and gathering, but also how it can be overwhelming, disconnecting people from natural rhythms. Bevelle's grand temples and towers showcase how religious authority manifests in physical dominance, creating structures so imposing they discourage questioning through sheer architectural intimidation. The calm land's emptiness after millennium of summoners training there becomes monument to all the lives spent preparing for sacrifice that served only to perpetuate need for more sacrifice. The space should feel triumphant, gathering place of heroes, but instead it feels melancholic, beautiful but haunted by weight of accumulated loss. Zanarkand ruins demonstrate civilization's impermanence, how even great cities eventually fall, but also how memory persists through ruins, how what was lost continues shaping present even in absence. The use of water as recurring visual motif connects to themes of flow and cycle, how life moves through different states while maintaining essential continuity. Blitzball, played in Sphere of Water, becomes metaphor for navigating life within boundaries you cannot escape, finding grace and skill and joy despite constraints. The sending performed over water demonstrates death as transition rather than ending, spirits flowing from one state to another, released from attachment to continue through the cycle. Sin's association with water reflects how danger can lurk beneath beautiful surfaces, how the same element that enables life can also destroy it when forces beyond our control reshape it toward destructive ends. The soundtrack by Nobuo Uematsu deserves recognition as integral to the narrative's emotional impact, creating atmosphere that enhances every scene and lingers in memory long after the experience ends. The main theme Zanarkand captures melancholy and beauty simultaneously. Piano melody that feels like memory crystallized into sound, nostalgia for something you never experienced but somehow recognize. to Zanarkand's simplicity becomes increasingly complex on repeated listens, revealing layers that mirror the narrative's gradual revelation of hidden depths beneath apparent simplicity. Sutekidane, the romantic theme, expresses longing and connection through its melody, before the lyrics add explicit emotional content, creating feeling that transcends language barriers, that communicates directly through music's universal language. The normal battle theme's energy keeps combat engaging without overshadowing it, while boss themes escalate appropriately for significant confrontations. Seymour's theme combines religious grandeur with underlying menace, suggesting corruption hidden within ornate surfaces. The final battle music progresses through stages that reflect the narrative's emotional journey, from desperate struggle against Jekt to the almost sad confrontation with Yu Yevon, ending not with triumphant fanfare, but with something quieter and more contemplative. The voice acting, revolutionary for its time in bringing fully voiced dialogue to the series, adds nuance that text alone could not convey. Tidus's voice carries the cocky confidence of teenager, trying to project maturity he does not fully possess, vulnerability breaking through in moments of crisis or revelation. Yuna's soft-spoken delivery suggests someone who has learned to speak carefully, to consider impact of her words, to carry authority without demanding it through volume. Auron's gravelly tones communicate experience and resignation, voice of someone who has already lost everything that mattered and continues forward through sheer determination rather than hope. Waka's accent, distinct from other characters, marks him as outsider to formal religious hierarchy despite his devotion. Someone whose faith is genuine but whose background is common rather than elite. Lulu's measured speech patterns reflect her control and precision, rarely raising her voice because she does not need volume when clarity and conviction suffice. Riku's energetic delivery conveys youth and optimism, voice of someone who refuses to let circumstances crush her spirit, who maintains brightness even in darkness because the alternative is succumbing to despair. The sphere system, while primarily mechanical, connects thematically to the narrative's emphasis on recording and memory, on preserving experiences and knowledge for those who come after. Sphere recordings appear throughout the game as method of communication across time and death, allowing characters to speak to future they will not see, to leave messages that outlast their own existence. This echoes how cultures transmit knowledge across generations, how we are shaped by voices of those who came before even when we never met them, how understanding present requires engaging with preserved past. The game's pacing balances exploration and progression effectively, providing room for players to engage with side content and world building without losing narrative momentum. Mandatory story beats propel the pilgrimage forward, while optional content fleshes out the world and characters, creating experience that can be as focused or expansive as individual preference dictates. The structure mimics pilgrimage itself, journey where destination matters, but the experiences along the way define the traveler, where side paths and detours contribute to growth as much as direct progress toward goal. The development team's decision to create regions with distinct cultural identities rather than generic fantasy landscapes pays dividends in immersion and memorability. Each location feels lived in, occupied by people with their own concerns and traditions, connected to larger world but maintaining distinct character. Kilika's rebuilding after Sin's attack shows resilience and community support. Luca's commercialism and entertainment industry demonstrate how some aspects of society continue regardless of existential threat. Guado Salam's architecture reflects Guado physiology and aesthetics, reminding us that Spira contains multiple intelligent species with different needs and perspectives. The multi-ethnic and multi-species composition of the party itself makes statement about unity and cooperation, about how diverse perspectives and capabilities strengthen rather than weaken collective effort. Each member brings unique skills and viewpoints, their differences becoming advantages rather than obstacles, demonstrating that homogeneity is not required for effective collaboration. This diversity extends beyond combat mechanics to narrative function, different characters responding to events from their varied cultural contexts, creating conversations that acknowledge complexity rather than imposing single interpretation on ambiguous situations. The game's treatment of death and grieving provides one of its most emotionally resonant through lines, exploring how loss shapes survivors and how communities process collective trauma. The sending ritual gives death meaning and structure, provides framework for acknowledging loss and beginning process of letting go, but it also acknowledges that letting go is process rather than moment, that grief continues long after ritual concludes. Yuna's multiple performances of the sending throughout the game chart her own relationship with loss, from Kilika's destroyed village to Bevelle's execution attempt to Auron's final rest, each ritual marking different stage in her understanding of what it means to say goodbye. The unsent throughout the game demonstrate what happens when people cannot or will not let go, when attachment persists beyond natural end, creating distortions that harm both the spirit who cannot rest and the living who must navigate a world where death has lost its boundaries. The Maester's refusal to relinquish power corrupts Yevon from within. Seymour's persistence as unsent allows him to continue pursuing his nihilistic agenda. Auron's choice to remain demonstrates how even voluntary extension of existence for noble purpose carries costs, how postponing natural endings creates complications regardless of the intentions behind the postponement. The game's questions about what makes life worth living despite inevitable suffering resist simple answers, presenting perspectives from multiple characters without privileging any as definitively correct. Yuna finds meaning in service and self-sacrifice, in helping others and easing suffering even at cost to herself. Tidus locates value in immediate experience, in joy and connection, and the feeling of being alive regardless of what tomorrow brings. Auron sees worth in loyalty and completion, in keeping promises and fulfilling obligations, even when they offer no personal benefit. Waka discovers purpose through faith that evolves from rigid adherence to thoughtful engagement, from accepting what he is told to questioning and evaluating based on evidence and experience. No single answer emerges as superior to others, suggesting that meaning is discovered rather than assigned, that individuals must find their own reasons for continuing rather than having universal purpose delivered to them. This respects player agency in the same way the narrative ultimately respects character agency, acknowledging that while context shapes options, individuals still choose how to respond to that context, what to value and what to dismiss, how to construct meaning from raw experience. The game's legacy extends beyond its immediate narrative to its influence on how video games approach storytelling, character development, and thematic complexity. It demonstrated that games could tackle serious subjects without becoming didactic, could explore philosophy and spirituality and social criticism while remaining entertaining and accessible. The emotional impact players report even decades after initial release suggests the narrative resonates on levels beyond mere plot, that something about the characters and themes connects to universal human experiences in ways that transcend cultural and temporal specificity. Final Fantasy X asks what it means to be real when reality is constructed, what it means to have faith when authorities prove unworthy of it, what it means to love when loss is inevitable, what it means to hope when circumstances suggest despair is more rational response. These questions lack comfortable answers, but their exploration provides framework for thinking about our own lives, our own struggles with identity and belief, and connection and meaning. The game becomes mirror, reflecting our anxieties back to us in forms that make them manageable, that allow examination without overwhelming us, that provide distance while maintaining emotional proximity. The story ends not with absolute closure, but with beginning, the eternal calm, creating space for something new, for Spira to discover who it can be when not defined by sin's existence, when not organized around cycle of destruction and temporary reprieve. This openness reflects reality of significant change, how endings of old systems create uncertainty as much as opportunity, how liberation from oppression does not automatically result in perfect society, but rather in space to build something better through conscious effort and continuing adjustment. Yuna's final words. Asking whether the departed can hear her voice, whether Tidus knows she speaks to him, acknowledge that some questions remain unanswerable, while affirming that asking them matters anyway. We cannot know what comes after death, cannot prove whether consciousness persists in some form or dissipates entirely, but we maintain connections to those we have lost through memory and love, and the ways they shaped us, and those connections provide comfort even in absence of certainty. The game suggests that perhaps this is enough, that perhaps maintaining space in our hearts for those who are gone is its own form of continuation, its own defiance of endings. The pilgrimage through Spira, the journey from Besaid to Zanarkand and into Sin's heart, transforms everyone who undertakes it. They begin as a collection of individuals with their own reasons for traveling together, united by duty or convenience or personal quest, and they become something more, become family forged through shared trauma and shared triumph, become people who have seen each other at their worst and best and chosen to continue together anyway. This transformation mirrors the broader societal change from cycle-bound Spira to something new and undefined, both processes requiring courage to step into uncertainty, faith that alternatives exist, even when they are not yet visible, commitment to building something better even when you do not know exactly what better looks like. The story of Final Fantasy X is ultimately hopeful despite its tragic elements, affirming that cycles can be broken, that suffering need not continue simply because it always has continued, that individuals acting together can change systems that seem immutable when confronted alone. It acknowledges cost of change, does not pretend that breaking cycles comes without sacrifice or loss, but insists that cost is worthwhile when alternative is perpetual recurrence of the same pain, the same predetermined tragedies, the same limited victories that guarantee eventual defeat. It suggests that sometimes the most courageous act is refusing to accept what everyone says is inevitable, questioning whether the way things are is truly the way things must be, choosing uncertainty over comfortable but limiting certainty. If you found meaning in this journey through Spira, if Tidus and Yuna's story resonated with something in your own experience, consider sharing that connection. Leave a comment about which moment affected you most deeply, which revelation changed how you understood the narrative, which character's journey mirrored your own struggles with identity or faith or loss. Subscribe to continue exploring the forgotten corners of game narratives, the stories that shaped medium and culture, the characters who became real to us despite being constructions of code and writing and performance. And remember that sometimes the most important stories are not about saving the world, but about the people who choose to try anyway. about finding meaning in struggle itself, about refusing to surrender hope even when circumstances suggest hope is foolish, about loving despite knowing that love makes us vulnerable to loss, because vulnerability is price of connection, and connection is what makes existence worthwhile, despite its inevitable difficulties and eventual end.